It's time to build up your defenses because the siege update is coming to Dwarf Fortress. Protecting your fortress will be more challenging than ever before. Here come the goblins. They've brought battering rams, ride monstrous mounts, and their trolls are carrying giant pickaxes and have blocks for building. Invading squads are organized into several roles. They can charge in, hang back, ambush, and they can path around areas that have become too dangerous. Their engineers can build floors and stairs. They can break through fortifications and raised bridges. And if it comes down to it, they can dig slowly underground through natural walls. Ultimately, the goblins managed to overrun our test forts, but I'm sure you'll have more luck. Your dwarves aren't defenseless and have new tools to repulse their enemies. The existing catapult and ballista siege engines have been reworked to be more effective. There is also a new bolt thrower to rain ammunition down from your fortifications. Goblins can free their caged buddies during invasions, but traps have their uses. There are the old standbys of drowning and magma, which are still effective. The Dwarf Fortress Siege update releases November 3rd.
Wow, sooner than I thought. On November 3rd, 2025, the Siege update for Dwarf Fortress will release. Let's dive in. I was making a few bets in my head that this was going to be releasing somewhere in either, like, December or maybe as late as February, but from the looks of things, most of what has been talked about is here, or at least a good chunk of it. You've seen the trailers, so let's kind of break it down. The majority of this 1 minute and 30 second long trailer is showing new siege behaviors and siege weapons. What has me the most curious in this trailer is just how this is going to play in-game. The ballista look quite a bit different, but I'm not entirely certain how they're going to act differently from the original ballistas. Currently, they just kind of shoot in a straight line and are rather ineffective, so I'm curious about exactly what has been changed. This trailer doesn't really explain that too much. While Tarn does state that they've been reworked to be more effective, I'm very curious to see what has actually been done. The catapults look virtually identical to the old stuff, and the new sprites for the ballista are cool, but exactly how different are they? The really exciting thing from the player's perspective is the way these little bolt throwers work. They appear to just take a full stack of bolts, and then just rapid-fire blitz out the entire cartridge, or the entire stack. Which leads me to believe if you put a singular bolt into one of these, will they load them up until they're full? Do they take multiple stacks of bolts? Or is it just a singular bolt? Then fired out. Exactly how do these work? I'm kind of curious. Regardless, they certainly look pretty cool and seem quite effective. Something else that I should note while watching the footage in these trailers is it seems like the frame rate is roughly 100. Could be higher and it could be lower. It may also be sped up. Now I know that my computer can run the game this fast in a lot of situations, but if these appear to be firing extremely quickly, that might have something to do with it. I think a lot of people either play with lower frame rates, as they either intentionally turn down the frame rate to make the game more manageable, or due to having very large fortresses, the game naturally slows down on certain computers. All of these additions look really cool, but let's talk about what we see the goblins doing. Of course, there are these battering rams, which are fascinating, but we don't actually see them doing much aside from sitting here in the trailer. I really like the look of them, and I'm curious if, like, their heads are themed after the different kind of big monsters we see walking around in this siege. If you notice, there are several different demonic entities, or masters, or archdemons, I'm not entirely sure, but there's several large creatures throughout, and I'm curious if these are represented as heads on the battering rams. If that's the case, that's really cool, otherwise maybe I'm overthinking it. Regardless, they look neat, but I'm not entirely sure how they work in practice, as we don't see them doing much in this trailer. We do hear Tarn talking about how the squads work now, essentially splitting the armies up into several groups instead of one large ball. I presume this means that they will spread out and cause you different problems in different places around your fortress. At least, that's what I hope this means. This could also mean that now goblins can ambush, which would just mean they show up the same way the elves currently show up. In the current game, humans hang back. They kind of stick around outside and wait for you to come attack them, usually on their mounts. Dwarves often do this as well when you're at war with them in the current game. Goblins, however, will just charge straight in and attack, and elves will ambush, meaning they will be invisible and then suddenly appear. That's the way the game works right now. So the way Tarn describes this, it leaves me wondering a little bit, how is this going to differentiate from the current game? Are we going to have 4 squads come in at once from an enemy army, and one of them hangs around on the outside, one of them attacks, and then one of them kind of just wanders in circles until we go attack them? Is that how that's gonna work? Or is this like a per siege thing? I'm just curious to see the gameplay in action and see exactly how this functions. The more exciting change here is honestly how they're going to be able to build. The trolls being able to carry little containers full of stuff on their backs so they can build structures to attack you is exciting. I would also like to note here that if you actually look at the stairs and the floors that they build in this footage, they look a lot different from the dwarven stairs, meaning there's new sprites for the goblin constructions, which is kind of cool. The first time I watched this trailer, I almost jumped out of my chair with excitement. These little animations that the trolls are doing when they're attacking the walls, I was very much hoping that that was going to be something you would see in combat, similar to the little animations that we have right now in adventure mode. However, upon closer looking, it seems like this is just for digging, as well as constructing. Or at the very least, digging through this drawbridge. I'm not entirely sure if they're building another floor or if they're digging through the drawbridge. It's kind of hard to tell. Regardless, I was hoping that we would see some animations in combat, similar to the ones we have in adventure mode. But that doesn't seem to be the case yet. This is something I'm still hoping to see in the future, and very much hope will happen. I do also really like these floor tiles. They look like they have almost more thickness to them than the dwarf floors. They almost have a little bit of like horizontal look to them as well. Makes me wonder if there's going to be more visual upgrades to the way dwarven constructions look in the future, or if this is just specifically unique to sieges. I do very much hope that dwarven digging is going to get the same animations as digging through this corner piece. Now, initially I was a little worried when I saw this sequence of the goblins breaking into the absolute edge of the map, mostly due to the fact that I think it would kind of suck to have to refill all of these pieces after the goblins have broken through them. But I would like to remind you that you can refill blocks at the edge of the map in cavern layers, so I presume that we'll be able to refill these. I'm just not a huge fan of them digging straight down into the fort at the edge of the map. I would really like to know what causes them to do this and how deep they're willing to go into the edge of the fort. But all in all, I see this update as a very interesting step in the right direction. Even just hearing that there are reworks happening to the old siege engines and seeing this one here propped up on an edge, implying that probably it can shoot in multiple directions now, is exciting. If siege engines are even functional, that's already a huge improvement. But this shot here that we see of it firing doesn't look too different from what we've had before, so I'd like to see exactly what they're capable of. And I'm looking forward to testing it, frankly. Now, something about this has me curious, because more has been discussed to do with this update, or series of updates, if you will. Granted, this is definitely looking like it's going to be a large portion of it, and we're still just about a month out from release. Little less than that, in fact. Most of this stuff seems pretty functional, at least from a trailer perspective. So let me go over a few things that have been talked about in the past that are not included in this trailer. Back on February 12th, there was a posted roadmap talking about the expected things that will be worked on for Dwarf Fortress for the remainder of the year. I'm gonna highlight first the things that we've seen and the stuff that's already been added, and then talk about what still hasn't been shown or presumably isn't going to be in this coming update. So the first thing that's been finished and released and is in the current builds of the game are ranged weapons and squad fixes. Crossbows now work as intended and are more understandable for your average audience, and also significantly more effective and also usable in adventure mode. So that's all well and dandy. In this trailer, we do see that siegers are able to plan and do more, and they seem to be able to track where deaths are, at least if we take their words for it, or at the very least have some new behaviors such as building. The footage shows siegers being able to demolish and build, and Tarn has confirmed that this will be disableable at a difficulty level within your fortress settings. This trailer also confirms the new changes to siege weapons, making them more useful, as well as the bolt thrower, which was then later mentioned by Tarn in an interview I did on this channel. I'm also going to throw in the make Mega Beasts and Kobolds attacks more functional and interesting, mostly because there appears to be Mega Beasts in this siege. Unless these aren't Mega Beasts and are in fact the Sorcerers, which are also mentioned in this post. Now, granted, this is only a 1 minute and 30-second long trailer, which also shows battering rams, and these weren't mentioned in the blog post. So what hasn't been shown yet, and hasn't been seen yet? The roadmap from February 12th states that humans and dwarves should be more interesting, warlords and demon-trained sorcerers focused on siege warfare and infiltration. And it is certainly possible that's what these are. Maybe these aren't mega beasts or demons, perhaps they're sorcerers summoning demons. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's a sorcerer and that's a demon that it's summoned. I'm pulling at strings here, honestly. The next thing that has been talked about pretty extensively between interviews and blog posts and mentioned by Tarm on a number of occasions but hasn't been shown in any substantial way is temple-based defenses. for quote-unquote any magic that proves too annoying to combat with soldiers. So if these are sorcerers, and if these sorcerers are summoning demons, can I nullify them with a temple? We don't really know if that's going to be included here or not. But it's still an interesting concept that is very curious to me, and I'm curious to see if that's going to be in this update or something that's coming in the future. The next one, which has me really excited, which, again, we haven't seen here, is Tarn mentions that cage traps are still useful, and then shows the creatures going around them. The blog post from February 12th talks about cage traps getting an upgrade and being able to capture megabeasts. Tarn then elaborated in the interview that I did with him and said that they would be able to catch creatures more effectively in some cases if properly baited, and certain things could escape. Now, in the trailer, it is mentioned that enemies can now break their friends out, but there was one thing that Tarn talked about that isn't shown here, which is large cages to catch megabeasts that aren't normally catchable. And the included assumption that some things like dragons and giants and other megabeasts will no longer be cage trappable, unless you build a special trap. Tarn actually talked about the concept or idea of maybe building wagon-like traps that require more space, presumably similar to these battering rams. Finally, the blog post also mentions combat flow and combat styles that come up, and perhaps finally tackling reach for things like spears or polearms. Obviously, that hasn't been discussed here or shown in any real way, so I presume that that isn't going to be something we'll see here. But maybe we will. The more I look through this trailer and footage, the more excited I get, but also in ways, the more skeptical I get. I think that's only logical. There's a lot going on here, and it's a very short trailer. And this is also only a goblin siege. What are human sieges going to look like? What are dwarven sieges going to look like? If I get attacked by an opposing dwarven faction, are they just going to beeline it directly to my tavern, directly from the surface, with a pickaxe mining at the speed of a legendary miner? Or are they going to have the same behaviors as these goblins? I'm very curious to see what that looks like. At the end of the day, right now sieges in Dwarf Fortress are stale and haven't really changed in the time that I've played. And I've been playing this game since 2009-ish, so it's been a very long time. I'm curious to see what the goblins are able to accomplish, but I'm also just as curious to see what the humans, elves, and dwarves will be able to accomplish. Exactly how different these sieges will be, and what we should expect from opposing factions. I can still continue to dream, I guess, about the elves summoning the trees to fight me, but that's, I guess, a tree that I'll have to continue barking up for the rest of my existence. Are you excited for this update? Are you going to be playing on the 3rd of November? I know I will be. At this point, I'm just happy to see more footage of this stuff. Of course, they also include this beautiful splash art at the end of the trailer, and I think that they forgot to put the hat on the skeleton. What do you think of this update? You excited? You looking forward to it? You gonna play it? Check out the live streams over at twitch.tv/BLINDIRL, and you can support this channel on my blog at BLINDIRL.com. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.